Hey everyone! Today I'm extremely lucky to be able to interview the extraordinary Alicia Tuckerman. Alicia is an incredible author and is well known for her book. If I tell you, I'm going to show off this here. I find Alicia to be an inspirational author because she represents not only the LGBTQ plus community in her literature, but also people with fatal chronic illness. I almost got tongue-tied on that word. As one of her characters in this book lives with an expiration date. Representation absolutely matters, especially to teenagers who are struggling to love themselves for who they are and be normal, whatever normal is. And so to have lesbian characters and characters with a debilitating illness in this book is amazing. Alicia, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Thank you for interviewing me and taking the time to come into the city.
Oh, I'm going to have a minivan come with me. Oof. Okay, are you ready to get started?
I'm ready. Hit me.
About if I tell you, what age group is the book targeted at?
I think essentially the main readership would be upper secondary school, so probably from that 14, 15 up category. I'm a big believer that, YA books are a readership and not necessarily a genre, so, there are adults who have read the book and will enjoy it, but I think the most important parts of the message that I wanted to get across are for that kind of teenage range. I think some more mature, say 12 to 14-year-olds could enjoy the book, but it does deal with some heavy themes and some homophobia that might be hard for a younger audience to really read and process in a healthy, safe way. Similarly, it's hard for some adults to read and process in a safe and healthy way. So it's it does tackle some issues, but I think that main group is upper secondary.
Okay, so it really depends on what you're into reading and what your level of tolerance is.
Yeah, I think level of maturity, level of tolerance, level of what you want to get out of a book as well. It tackles some issues. There's some mixed reviews, with I think you get with any sort of creative pursuit that you put out into the world. But I think if you are wanting to read a love story that has some broader issues that are inherently difficult to deal with, but I think overall the book has a message of hope, and it's a bit of, has a positive ending. I think you'll enjoy the book.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
It looks amazing. It's been on my book birthday, which was first up a long time, so this is just a huge moment for me. Okay, so writing about a character with a debilitating illness, was that challenging or?
It was, because I am able-bodied. I don't have any debilitating illness, and I've not lived with any. I have a brother who has a brain injury, which he got when he was young, which has got nothing to do with the book, but I do have some level of understanding of disability and challenges in that regard. And it required a great deal of research on my part, because I don't have hemochromatosis, which is the disability that Phoenix has in the book. I don't have any sort of heart condition. I don't know anything about what it's like to live with those conditions. And I think if you're going to write about something like that from a perspective that is not your own lived experience, you need to get it right from a clinical, factual basis. So for, that part doesn't come into the book until a very long way, like till the last kind of 6 or 7 chapters. But for the part that it was in the book and the degree of research, I have folders and folders and folders of information about heart disease, if you would like to know. If anyone wants, and highlighted and passages, and to be able to weave the nuances into the first half of the book that are relevant, that when you do know what the outcome is, you can be able to reflect and say, well, that perhaps there were some indications earlier in the book. And I think trying to find a representation of an illness and do it justice, and because obviously someone with this illness may pick up the book and they may read it, and if I've been insensitive to any of the issues, that would be a real big problem for me. So I think, the research aspect, spending 3 days researching something for a sentence is a lot of commitment.
Yeah, research can definitely chew into writing time.
It can.
So
But I also don't hate that.
Yeah, because you learn stuff, and then that's also really enjoyable.
Definitely. Felt I learned a lot about heart disease.
Where did you get the inspiration for the personalities and the people in that book?
I think generally in life you encounter people, you see a stranger in the street who's got a particular mannerism or whatever, and you kind of you file that away, and you think, oh, that's an interesting way that person holds a cup, or that's an interesting way this person's folding a paper, or you kind of file that away. But I think the inherent personalities, they, without wanting to sound like a terribly crazy person, these people arrived in my brain, and they were like, this is, and when it's really good writing, really easy writing, it's literally like people having a conversation in my head and I'm just writing it down. And I don't really know where they came from. I think, in a very conceited kind of way, I think I'd like to pretend that the character of Phoenix, I could be a bit like her if I want to reimagine my high school years and be cooler than I was and be more outspoken and more righteous, I think, about some issues. I think that's partially where some of her character and some of her personality comes from. It's just a reimagined version of how I would have liked to have been. And Alex lots of people ask, is this my story? And it's not my story. I mean, Alex's situation is similar to where I found myself when I was growing up. The town of Two Creeks, which is a fictional place, is definitely based on where I grew up, not necessarily with the societal values and the opinions expressed by the people in the book, but definitely the landscape and the town and the buildings and the high school, and that is where I grew up and where I went to school. And and I think in this book, the setting in the town of Two Creeks is almost it's a character of its own, and that rural environment, which I really love to write about. But I think a lot of Alex's fears and frustrations were my own, definitely. Not necessarily what happens, but how she felt about things and how scared she was definitely how I felt.
Yeah, it definitely depends, because inspiration for a character can come from anywhere, and you don't sound crazy when you say they just pop into your head. That happens a lot. That's just normal.
Yeah, it really is. Sometimes it's I'm at work trying to get stuff done, and they start. But you can't time that. Like, I'll be at home all weekend and have plenty of time, and they will be silent.
Yeah.
They don't talk to me at all, but I'll be at work trying to get some stuff done, and then they want to chat. It's very inconvenient.
Yeah. They just they pick the worst timing.
They do.
They really do. It's like, oh, you're busy. I'm going to annoy you with an idea.
Yeah. It's very inconvenient.
What would have to be your favourite scene to write out of if I tell you?
Ooh. That's a very good question. I think I really enjoyed writing. There's a scene kind of towards the second half of the book where Alex and Phoenix go on a date, and they go skydiving, and it's a bit of a theme in the book. Kind of the fears are kind of, they speak about it earlier on. Saying that just because you're scared of something doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And there's this kind of metaphor for skydiving, and they go and jump out of a plane. I think I really, and then that's quite an intense sort of scene. You do that, and it's all adrenaline and endorphins. And I think I really enjoyed writing that, and how that moment was a turning point, I guess, for Alex, when she kind of was like letting go of the fears, or not necessarily letting go of them, but feeling brave. And I think that's probably the most important message that I wanted to get across in the book from a lot of aspects, not just Alex and her coming out, but Phoenix and her illness and learning how to live your life as bravely as you can, regardless of different things that you might have or societal pressures. But yeah, I think that was probably one of my favourite scenes.
That sounds like a really awesome scene. So I can't wait to read that in there.
I look forward to hearing what you think.
Were your parents and friends supportive of your book or not really?
Yes, unfortunately, my mum passed away 8 years ago, so she didn't get to see it as a book. She knew that I always wanted to write a book, but she didn't get to see that. And again, my dad knew that I was getting published, but he passed away before it came out. So he had, when I was doing the edits, he was in hospital with a terminal cancer diagnosis, and so I wrote most of the end of it and did all the hard work, in hospital waiting rooms and corridors, and I talked to a lot of cardiologists while I was there. I was that annoying person. But yes, I mean he passed away in the December and it came out in the March. So he knew it was going to be a thing. But my parents, I think I like to think they would have been pretty proud of me. Even as a 35-year-old, well, I'm not 35 anymore, but then I was. You still want your parents to be proud of you.
Yeah.
And all my friends and stuff have been very supportive. I mean, I've had, as I said, there's some things there, and when you read it, you might, I mean, I'm assuming you've read some reviews and you might know the general gist, and you also know that there is somebody with a terminal diagnosis, and you know how it ends, I'm assuming. But I've had some of my good friends and even people very close to me have been a little bit cross with me for some certain things that I did, but that's okay. They've been very generally supportive of the book, but not everyone loves how it ends. And I understand that comes from a place of understanding, and I stand by the book 100%. But everyone's going to have their own opinion of it.
Exactly, everyone's going to have their own opinion.
Everyone reads the same book differently. Exactly. And that's okay. And it's kind of, you have to learn to have a bit of a thick skin when you put something out into the world for everyone to read and comment upon. Yeah, because it's just sending something out and you're like, please. Well, that's you. I mean, I'm not going to pretend you don't want everyone to love it, because that's part of it. But that is very unrealistic. Yeah, not everyone's going to like it. There's going to be some people, and then you're going to have some people who just adore it and want more of it. And that's it. And that is what I have found. Some people have, said that it's the worst book they've ever read, and some people have said it's the best book they've ever read. So it's that's life. Exactly. If you could... Sorry. It's okay. If you could travel through time and give advice to your 12-year-old self, what would you say? Gosh. 12. That's such an important age. And I mean, when I was 12, when I was doing it, is different than 12 now, I think. But different in the sense of the world is different. But I think what you think and feel and fear is all still the same. I think I would tell myself to not be in such a hurry, to be more than I was. I tell myself that not to be scared of myself, or scared of how I feel, or scared of how other people will feel about how I feel. Not to I think mainly my thing is don't rush. Once you're grown forever. But even as a 12-year-old, I was starting to, come to terms with my sexuality and who I was and how I felt and who I was attracted with, and I was living in this little small town community, and I didn't tell anyone, but in my head, even at that age, I had this fear that it was just there was never going to be a good reaction. And I was even as a 12-year-old, I was in such a rush just to leave, to get out of there before anyone kind of found me out. And I think I'd just say that everything, you know, that it will be okay, and if you just slow down and just let things be, and the people that you love and who love you will always still love you, even if they struggle with certain things, that you'll get there in the end. But and also to be brave in a courageous way, and not in a arrogant way, or in a, you know, when you get a little bit older and you think you're invincible sort of way, which are some mistakes that I made. But yeah, 12, I would just tell myself to calm down.
Because you must have been really happy to grow up in a rural town with that.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I had a great upbringing. It was, you know, quintessentially rural. You know, me and my friends who sleepovers and dirt bikes and camping and horses, and there was no Facebook, and I didn't have a mobile phone until I was 18. You know, there was no. We had some, like, when I was older, we had dial-up internet, but, you know, getting my parents to disconnect the phone line was like, you know, trying to convince them to, you know, chop off their arm. You know, it was this foreign thing. So I had a great upbringing, but I think when I got to that, 12, 13, you know, that first year of high school, everyone starts, you know, pairing off like animals on Noah's Ark, and, you know, you get kind of terrified when you see all your friends start to, you know, have all these feelings about who they're supposed to have feelings for, and you don't, and you know, and you're conflicted and you're confused, and you think that you know, and, you know, growing up, I didn't know any lesbians. I didn't know of any. I mean, I'm sure they existed in my town. I'm 100% sure now. Now I'm older, I know they were there, but it's not something that was ever spoken about in my household, not in any positive way, of course, and not to you know, that just was the way my parents were. I mean, they weren't being outwardly awful, but, you know, there were never any positive comments about being the type of different that I felt I was. And so I was very scared, and I think a lot of it was in my head, and a lot of it is, I mean, I left home when I was 16, which is an inherently terrible thing to do. like when you are not grown when you are 16. But I think I was already, at 12, I was already thinking about moving out as soon as I could. And I was, you know, I did everything I could to put all the steps in place between 12 and 16 so that I would be able to do that. But, you know, hindsight's an interesting thing. Things you start to realise when you're 37.
Yeah. I read online that you used to you always loved writing. What type of stories did you write as a kid?
Oh God, I wrote some terrible stories as a kid. I've got my parents, I've got a few bits and pieces from when I was younger that my parents had kept, and, you know, and I wrote a story. I was always entering writing competitions and stuff, and they were not good. I mean, I'm not going to pretend they would. Like, you know, I wrote stories about anything. Like, I wrote a story about a fish, and I wrote a story when I was like 10 about gangs. I don't know anything about gangs. Why was I writing a story about gangs in a city when I lived on a farm in rural New South Wales? You know, I wrote these epic kind of, you know, filled up exercise books about stories about, you know, boys playing rugby and like, you know, and what it was like to be on and again, because I think this is probably a reflection on the type of media we consume, like stories set in America, and I wrote. My mum was a drama teacher and a dance teacher, and so I wrote a lot of, you know, poetry, and I was always very, you know, went to the Stedfords every year and did the readings and did all the drama workshops, and, you know, not over here, but like the equivalent of WAPA in New South Wales is ATYP, and I went to all that sort of stuff and got kind of really immersed in that, and then I went into like script writing and used to write these epic, you know, epic sagas they didn't really go anywhere. They were just never-ending stories that never had a resolution. But yeah, I think I started to kind of hone that when I was probably about 14, 15, and I started thinking about what I wanted to say a little bit more. But I think, and then when I left home, and writing became a very important part of me from a very personal perspective. A lot of journaling, a lot of poetry and angry, angsty stuff that teenagers write about. And I've got those books at home, which is nice to have. Not all of them, because inevitably life eats some of those things up along the way. And when you move around from place to place, you lose some of that stuff. But I think, writing, being able to write and get things out of my head sounds very dramatic, but I think it probably saved my life.
Yeah, because when you bottle stuff up, it's hard. So when you write, you kind of get that stuff out.
Yeah, and it can be cathartic. And also, I used to do a lot of, when I was probably 16, early 17, I did a lot of writing, not about myself, but about how I wished things were. Like, I created these worlds where everyone was happy and everything was good and everyone was kind, and kind of wrote myself into these fantasies to make myself feel better about the harsh realities of the world. It's all very heavy. Sorry, but yeah. But no, I like to write, and I think I'd like to try and write maybe a middle grade book, something that reminds 12 and 13-year-olds to slow down and enjoy that space that you are in right now, and you're not grown, and you don't have to be grown. You don't have to plan for being grown. Just be 12 and 13.
When you were a rich and famous orphan, what is anything frivolous that you just wanted to?
I have this discussion. Holden and I have had this discussion about all the wasteful things we will spend our fortunes on. I mean, I think he's probably going to get there before I am, which, I'm very supportive of him, but also insanely jealous. I think, not really for a 12-year-old audience, but I think I would get a bunch of tattoos because they're expensive, and I would love way more, but the money is like a lot. And a boat. Let's not pull any punches here. I want a big boat and lots of tattoos and a farm. A farm in the Swan Valley with like animals and lots of outbuildings and a pool. So when Netflix comes knocking, where you at, Netflix? That's what I'm going to spend all my money on.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. But yeah.
That actually sounds like awesome.
Yeah. Oh, and a miniature donkey.
Oh.
Sorry.
No, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
Miniature
Sorry.
donkey.
Yeah.
Oh. I can imagine it.
So yeah. I mean, realistically, but I mean, who cares about the real world?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now we're into the speed questions.
All speed questions, okay.
So I have been told that these interviews keep getting longer, so I'm just going to try to not respond at all.
Okay.
What are you writing at the moment?
Okay, I'm writing a book about a girl who is in a car accident and she has an injury, but before that she dreamed of being a professional soccer player, and now she can't do that. And she is struggling with where she fits in the world and how she learns to participate in something she loves but is never going to be professional at.
That sounds very deep. Sorry, I responded. It's going to get long. What's your favourite ice cream flavour?
The Tonight Dough ice cream, Ben & Jerry's.
Actually sounds kind of nice. What's one of your favourite stories you've written?
If I tell you, it's my baby.
Oh, slime babies. How long did it take you to write, if I tell you?
Total, not cumulative, but 10 years.
Who was your favourite or most inspirational author?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. Oh, who's my favourite or most inspirational author? I think I was probably shaped by Marlena Maketa and John Marsden. I don't know if they're necessarily my favourite adult authors, but that's whose writing shaped me as a writer.
Do you prefer cats or dogs?
Dogs, but I have a cat.
We can still be friends. You like dogs.
Yeah, okay.
Do you prefer reading or e-books or hard books?
Hard books.
Yes. Where's your favourite place to write?
It's like I have a desk that I never use, like literally in bed or on the lounge or outdoors somewhere.
Do you remember the first book you ever read or your favourite childhood book?
First book I ever read and my favourite childhood book is Black Beauty. Like, I mean, there was probably a book before that, but that's the book I remember as the book that the first book that I read and the first book that I reread and the first book that I've read over and over and over and over again. And I wrote, I mean, when I was a kid, fan fiction wasn't a thing, but I wrote Black Beauty fan fiction. Like it was that important to me. It's the most important book, and and I love that the author Anna said, well, that's the only book she ever wrote, ever, and it was only published like 5 months before she died, and she was an old lady. But it's such an important book to me.
What's your biggest achievement so far?
Oh, biggest achievement. As far as books go, and writing, I think I don't know. I've been very lucky to. I'm gonna show you a trick. Get the middle pages. You loop them over. There you go.
It's actually really cool.
I was very lucky to have the opportunity to do a lot of things last year. I did, I got an invite. I went to the Sydney Writers Festival. I did a week at Bellingen, and I got to go into high schools, and I got to talk to kids and teach them how to write. Not in a very broad sense, but very basic sort of thing. Got to talk to a lot of kids. I got to speak with a lot of young queer kids at the Freedom Centre, and talk to them about my stuff. So I think I don't think there's one thing. I mean, it's not book related, but I mean it's writing related. Like I got invited to go over to Monash University and contribute to a paper on the representation of girls and girlhood in books, and having this very I'm small fish, but having a platform to be able to have these discussions with people and to contribute to a discussion that is going to continue to shape girls and teens and boys and kids as they grow into years to come. People might still be reflecting upon stuff that I've had an opportunity to be involved in. I think anything gives you an opportunity to be part of the discussion that you're passionate about, literacy and kids, and just specifically teenagers, is really, I don't think that's an achievement, but it's been a massive opportunity for me and something that I'm very humbled by every time it happens.
Do you have any big goals for the future? Any writing being released soon?
I wish, and I've been and my publisher's probably very cranky with me because I was supposed to have finished this book a while ago. And I mean, at the moment, the goal is to get it finished and to get it done and to move on to the next one. If I can imagine my life in 10 years, I've written a bunch of books and I've written enough books to be able to not have a day job. Although not that I hate my day job, it's not something, but it doesn't really allow a lot of time for writing books, which is a bit frustrating. And so I think the goal would be just to write the books and keep taking advantage of all these opportunities that may come to me or may not, and just being able to write the types of books I want, to put certain LGBTQI issues into the narrative, because You know, there's definitely more than when I was a teenager, but there is still not enough queer stories. There's not enough lesbian stories or stories that are not inherently about being a lesbian, but you know they're about soccer, or they're about school, or they're about, you know, crazy wild adventures or going and slaying dragons. But at the same time, you can be a lesbian, or you can be gay, or you can be trans. And I think there's definitely room for stories about lots of things, but with a greater diversity of characters. And so that's what I'd like to do. So the grand scheme.
That's actually really awesome.
I'm glad you think so.
Do you have any advice for young writers?
Some of my advice can sometimes come across as being negative, but it's not negative. Sometimes I say, like, if I've had some young writers come up to me and say, oh, you know, it's really hard. I think I might just stop. And they get a bit shocked when I say to them, well, do it, try, like, try and stop, because this is not something that is, you can't just write a book and it's not easy. Like it's, but I mean, if the thing is, I couldn't stop if I tried. Like, I mean, sometimes I'll take a break, but I couldn't live without it. And I think if you can, then you probably should. And that sounds really harsh sometimes, but I think it's something that you have to, and it takes great sacrifice sometimes. Like, I've missed social stuff, I've missed doing things with my kids, I've missed doing things with my girlfriend, I've missed phone calls, I've missed, you know, opportunities, I've missed work to be able to write and to be able to do this. And it's not, and it's always, I mean, for me, it is always worth it, but it is not an easy thing to do. So I think if you are starting to think that you've had enough and you don't want to do it anymore, well then, you know, if you can live without it, then you should probably pick something else.
Exactly. It's not harsh advice, but actually is amazing advice.
So, I'm glad you think so.
Thank you so much for letting me interview you. This has been amazing.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for interviewing me and for, you know, taking the time to consider me and to want to read my book.
I've been wanting to read this for so long.
Well, so you have to get someone to read it first, just to make sure it's all appropriate.
Yeah, I'll shove my sister in there. She'll read it.
Yes.
So I will shove some links to your website so people can see how amazing you are. Please make sure to like and share so we can share how awesome